Welcome, everyone, to today's GNCC Lunch and Learn. My name is Hugo Cheshire, and it's my pleasure to be your host for the next hour. Today's topic is incredibly important for every organization with employees, and mastering it means the difference between success and failure for any business, nonprofit, or government agency, no matter their size. We're talking about employee compensation and how getting compensation right will help you attract and retain the best talent in your industry, keep you competitive in the market, and support your organization's goals and values. Our Lunch and Learn is made possible by the generous support of YMCA Employment and Immigrant Services of Niagara. It's my pleasure to introduce Iris Corrales, Administration Manager of Immigrant Services with YMCA Niagara, to tell us a little bit more about all the things that the YMCA does for employers and job seekers. Iris, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Hugo, for that warm welcome. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this Lunch and Learn. We're very excited to have you. The YMCA of Niagara is very pleased to continue to sponsor these sessions. As we know, they provide a lot of really great information for our employers and our community and our region here in Niagara. We appreciate all the important work that GNCC does for our region, and we're happy to be here. I won't take up too much time. I just wanted to spotlight two services that the YMCA offers. We have three offices, one in St. Catharines, one in Niagara Falls, and one in Thorold. And one program that I thought you might be interested in is called the Canada-Ontario Job Grant. Through this program, we help employers who are hoping to grow their already existing employees and want to see them move and advance within their company. Sometimes all that is needed is a little bit of extra training. So we have funding provided to us through the government to be able to help and facilitate training needs for existing employees in your company. We also have another program that helps internationally trained professionals coming to Niagara and looking to go back into their original career here. So if you know any internationally trained nurses, doctors, engineers, architects, or somebody even in trades who was a mechanic back home, a plumber back home, we are able to help navigate the difficult process sometimes of going through a regulatory body, or even in the trades. Sometimes we can go from doing a 4-year apprenticeship to doing a 6-month trade equivalency assessment. So we're helping to get newcomers back into their field faster, and this helps employers by being able to hire all this great skill that is coming into Niagara, and just being able to tap into those resources a little bit faster. If you guys have any questions about these services or all the other great services that the Y provides, we're always more than happy to have a discussion. You're free to reach out to me, and I'd be more than happy to see how we can help. All our services are free of charge to clients and to employers as well. So I look forward to hearing from some of you, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing the upcoming conversation.
All right. Thank you so much, Iris. The YMCA is a great partner, and their extensive employment services programs help connect employers with talent. If you're hiring, the YMCA makes it easy for you. If you'd like more information about those programs or any of the YMCA's other offerings, we'll put their link in the chat. And if you're looking for talent, give them a call. Before we delve into the core topic of our session today, we have a 5-minute financial download from C.R. Smith Financial Services, brought to us by my good friend and investment wizard, Brandon Curry, advisor at C.R. Smith Financial and Sun Life Financial. Take it away, Brandon.
It looks like you got a check in the mail. Thanks, Hugo. That was really nice of you to say that. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and thank you, Hugo, for this opportunity. Our company is absolutely very privileged to be a part of these Lunch and Learns for this entire year. So I'd just like to thank you and remind everyone my name is Brandon Curry, and along with my colleagues Matt Milner and Jay Fast, we are from C.R. Smith Financial. And this coming May, Smith Financial will be in the business for over 50 years. As I've discussed on Lunch and Learns before, our three main areas of facets of business are insurance, both personal and corporate. Wealth, which is we are a full service brokerage that has partnerships with all the major fund and ETF companies in Canada. And we also specialize in financial planning with aiding families and also business owners. And finally, the group and personal benefits. We have talked about this in quite extensively, and it's only fitting that I bring this up because Laura is on the call, and her topics today just completely was a great synergy to what our company has been advocating for several months. And I won't take much of her thunder. I will just remind everyone that we did discuss the one key aspect is benefits and how that can improve your employee compensation package, which Laura will go way more in depth than I ever will. However, we're the ones that come to make that employee benefit package to retain and entice employees to come with your firm. One major piece that we're seeing a huge increase in that Laura will be touching on is the healthcare spending accounts. This is something that you can add to your organization either as a standalone or something to complement an existing group benefits plan that allows you to keep your premiums at a fixed rate or within a very predetermined rate, and giving your employees more benefits to utilize to help with their health, their mental health, their physical health, and even their time off with family. This has been a huge, we've seen a huge increase into this, and we've been able as a firm to keep employers' premiums with group benefits at a more predictable and consistent rate the minute that you add one of these vehicles to your existing plan. Not wanting to take any more thunder away from Laura because she'll go this into way more detail. And we had a lovely conversation earlier today. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to do a lot less than my 5-minute countdown there, Hugo. Okay.
All right, no worries. Thank you so much, Brandon, and thanks for keeping it on topic for today's webinar. It's always valuable to know about the extra benefits you can offer besides just the paycheck, and I'm sure we're going to get into that, but thank you. C.R. Smith has proudly served Niagara and beyond since 1974, and they have an amazing team of experts like Brandon who know everything about putting your money to work for you. Contact them today. We'll put the link in the chat. And now it gives me great pleasure to welcome Laura Tolhook for the highlight of today's webinar. I'm so glad to have Laura with us today. She's the founder and principal consultant at Essential HR. For over 15 years, Laura has used sound HR practices with a pragmatic approach to improve business performance. She's worked with some of the biggest players in the restaurant, food service, and retail world as an integral member of the HR team. Laura is also a certified human resource leader through the Human Resources Professional Association. And when it comes to a difficult human resources question like compensation, she's exactly the kind of expert we need to guide us. And it's my great privilege to have her join us today and share some of her vast store of knowledge. Laura is going to cover a lot of ground. And if you have any questions, please type them into the chat and I'll be glad to ask them at the end of the presentation for you. Laura, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Iris, I gotta say, I love the Canada-Ontario Job Grant. If your company is not utilizing this amazing service from the YMCA, you need to talk to her today. It's one of the best programs in my opinion, in Ontario. Brandon, we're both, geeks in our own industry. When we jump on a call for 20 minutes in the morning, get excited about HSAs. You're in the right industry when that lights you up on a Wednesday morning. But I'm very excited to be here because compensation is a huge topic right now. And I'm just going to share my screen if that's okay. And we can jump right into this. We all good there? Awesome. Okay. So for those of you who we've never spoken before, like I said, my name is Laura Tolhook. I am the founder of Essential HR. We've been in business now for about 6 years. Prior to that, I worked for some of the larger industries in the retail environment and restaurant environment. Our clients primarily now are 0 to 50 team members. So some of the local ones that you might recognize include Habitat for Humanity, Young Caregivers, Startup Canada, Cheekbone, to name a few. What that's here to show you is that we don't niche down, but we take a variety of different industries and take the best practices from what we've learned in big business and customize it and make it work for small businesses. We love small businesses and the tenacity of small business owners, and we love working with these teams to really customize and make the things that make your business special come out within your HR policies and your HR programs. So we're going to jump in really quickly and take a look at why this conversation today is important and why even more so it's important for you to know what your compensation philosophy is. We'll talk about benchmarking and how to figure out what you should be paying. And then we're going to talk about job postings because this is a big one coming up. And what do we do about wages and job postings? And finally, how do we make this make sense to our teams? So this was pulled off of the ESDC, and what we see from this is a forecast that by 2031, there is going to be a massive need for people within the businesses and not enough people to fill it. It's going to get progressively worse over time. What does that mean for us small business owners? It means we need to know who we are and what we bring to the table in order to compete for top talent. Compensation being one of those. Another piece that's important to this conversation today is the concept of inflation, because this, inflation and compensation, salaries and increases go hand in hand. And some people have a difficult time trying to manage both. As you see back in 2023, we hit 6.8, give or take, depending on what graph you pull from what website. And now we're running at just above 2%. So whereas employees came to their teams, to their managers a lot in last year and said, well, inflation has raised 6, 7, 8%. Why is my increase only 3 or 4? I don't think we're going to see the same thing this year. Employees coming to us saying, well, inflation was only 2.3%. Why is my increase 4%? So we need to talk about inflation in a way when we're talking about salary increases and compensation that makes sense for our teams and for our business. But the main start of where we're going to start in this conversation is talking about a compensation philosophy. When people come to us and say, how much should I pay for this job? And we get this a lot from our small business owners. We do recruitment for a lot of small businesses, and they say, I need a marketing coordinator. How much should I be paying for a marketing coordinator? And the first question we ask is, well, what is your compensation approach? So there's 3 ways to take a look at where you want to be in the market. Do you want to be leading the market in your compensation? Do you want to be top of the market? Nobody can find a better job paying more than what you pay. Now, that's a great place to be, and it's a great way to recruit. It has some pitfalls. You might get some people on your team that you no longer want, but they're not willing to go anywhere else because you're paying top of the market. But when you're looking for quality talent, it's a very easy way to find quality talent. The second approach you can use is to lag the market. Now, this is not necessarily a bad thing, and especially as our small businesses are growing, we might not be able to be leading the market when it comes to compensation. So lagging the market, even though it has a negative connotation, is not necessarily a bad thing. What it requires of us as business owners is to come to the table with a very strong philosophy on who we are, why we, what our employer brand is, what we bring to the table as employers, and what people will receive when they are working for our organization. So when you're a small business, you're still competing for top talent with the people down the street. You're still competing against the big guys down the street. What makes you different? Have you ever sat down and thought, what makes me different as an employer? Not as my customer brand, but as my employer brand. What do I represent, and what do I want people to know about me as an employer? This all works into your employer brand, and it's going to drift into your compensation philosophy. Our third approach is obviously the middle of the road, the meet the market, being right in the middle. And as a company ourselves, that's where we like to be as well. You're meeting the market when it comes to compensation when you see a job posting for something that you have similar in your business, and you're like, oh, okay, that's what we pay. And then all of a sudden you'll see another job posting, you're like, oh gosh, that's not what we pay. We're way under that. And you see a third job posting, you're like, oh, okay, but we're better than that. That's when you know you're meeting the market, is when you have all of those conflicting concepts within 2 or 3 weeks of seeing other people's job postings and salaries on Indeed or ZipRecruiter or LinkedIn. When you're building your compensation philosophy, you need to know where you want to be, because that's going to start driving everything else. Your compensation philosophy needs to be in line with your corporate culture. So if you say, we are all about our people are the most important thing, we want to make sure our people are doing well, but you're lagging the market and you're not defining what you bring to the table as an employer, that's not going to be in alignment with your corporate culture. If you don't define your compensation philosophy and your employer brand, if you don't control that message, your employees and the culture is going to define itself, and the messaging is going to be outside of what your control is. And what I mean by that is if you don't explain what your compensation philosophy is, how you pay, why you pay, and what you pay to your teams, they are going to fill in the blanks. I'll give you an example of one client we worked with who had this compensation philosophy that they didn't have regular annual reviews. Instead, they paid for performance. So somebody could get 3 increases in 1 year because their performance was outstanding and they're doing better and they're learning more and taking on more. And somebody could not get a salary review in 2 years. Now, it's an interesting compensation approach. I maybe not advocating for that, but they could never get the communication out about this. So what happened is people just thought there was no rhyme or reason to whenever anybody was getting a salary review because they didn't control the message. And instead of saying, this is our compensation philosophy, they had disorganization and a bad reputation from it. So I'm sharing with you our compensation philosophy. We wrote this out about a year ago because just like, any other business, shoemakers' children have no shoes. So we're an HR business, and we said, we actually need to figure out what we do and how we pay as we grow. So we created this for our team, and I'm letting you steal it shamelessly. I'm happy to give out all these notes later after this presentation if you would like them. But we write this out, and we shared it with our team so they can know what our compensation philosophy at Essential HR is. A few things to notice here is that we align it with our values. So flexibility is very important to our organization. In so doing, we're making sure compensation includes flexibility. And I'll give you an example of that. We have one individual who is very financially focused. And when she wants her increases, she wants it in base salary. We have another individual who wants more flexibility in her life. So for the last 2 years, she's actually decreased her hours in lieu of taking a salary increase because to her, more flexibility is more important than that baseline salary. We outline when the salary reviews are, and the important part here is the increases. And we've had this conversation with our internal teams because it's not always outlined for our teams what is good performance and what is great performance. So the conversation that happened in our organization was, well, my clients love me and I do good work. And what we had to reframe was, your clients loving you and doing good work is baseline. What does great performance look like? It looks like there's an increase in sales, that there's reach out, that there's a community that is forming, that you're getting referrals in. What is the difference between good performance and great performance? Because if you can't define it for your team, they're going to either make it up or they're just going to get frustrated. So that brings us to benchmarking. Once you've defined where you want to be in your compensation approach, how do you figure out what to pay? So a few steps to benchmarking. When you're benchmarking your job, you can't just benchmark off of a job title. We have a small business client in the graphics and marketing industry who, in lieu of larger salary increases, just gave a better title. And that for their employee group, this seemed to really work well for them. And it gave them a sense of that there was growth within the organization. What happened with that over time, though, is somebody would take their director of operations title for their 8-person marketing group and go and benchmark it on Indeed and LinkedIn and Glassdoor and say, well, this is what I should be getting as a director of operations, without thinking that perhaps the director of operations job title that they're benchmarking is actually very different for Bell Canada or for Walmart or for even, the manufacturing organization down the street than what they're doing for their 8-person marketing company. We do this ourselves, though, as employers, too. We're not looking at the job descriptions. We're just looking at job titles, and we're not making accurate comparisons. Next, we got to figure out the key competitors in industries. So there's some industries that are always going to be leading the market. And so when we figure out where are these job titles coming from, we got to compare it against the industries that they're coming from. We're going to collect our data from various sources. We'll talk about that. And then adjust for geographical differences. And I love this one. I love this point because everybody says, okay, so we're in Niagara. We're not Toronto. So we don't need to pay what Toronto is paying. And I love to take this little graph here. And this was, I think, pulled for a systems administrator, IT administrator, posting off of the Government of Canada website. And it shows the averages of the low, median, and high in different regions in Ontario. And you'll find this very similar repeated for different job titles as well. And what you can see here is for our group here in Niagara, we're looking at 25, 46, 15, and 67, 31. And when we want to compare that to Toronto, sometimes we're a little higher and sometimes we're a little lower. So the geographical differences in salaries doesn't hold as much weight as we would love it to. Because in Niagara, we'd love to say, oh no, we pay $7,000 less because we're not in Toronto, the cost of living is different. But in actual fact, to stay competitive against your industry peers in this region, we got to take into account that geographical differences might not mean as much as we want it to. And then company-specific factors. So if you have things like a benefits plan, if you have great vacation policies, if you have flex time, if you have other programs and bonus structures that are included in your compensation total reward system, that often is not included when we're just benchmarking job to job. So where do we find this data? That's a great question. And you need to know where to find the data because your employees are finding this data and they're going to bring it to you and say, this is why you're not paying me enough. Look at what I found on Glassdoor. Oftentimes, as humans are, we cherry pick the data we want. And I've had this conversation with a few people who say, oh, look at this industry. They're giving employees 6 weeks vacation after 10 years. Or this industry is only giving 3 weeks vacation. Where should we sit? And we cherry pick the best or the worst in order to make our statement. So when we look for compensation data, we look at about these 5 different areas. Compensation surveys. So you have your big ones like your Mercers. Oftentimes you can participate in these surveys to get the data at a reduced price. They can be pretty expensive to get the full data. Sometimes you can do downloads that give you pieces of the data or a high level approach, which we save and we review back over and over again. Randstad has a great salary survey. Charity Village has a decently priced salary survey that they put out every year that we like to pick up as well. Government data, so ESDC and the government websites also give out data about the min, median, and max for job titles across industries and across that's like the little spreadsheet I shared with you there. Professional associations. So if you're part of, marketing associations, accounting associations, PR associations, or HRPA, for example, puts out their own salary data often as well. So going to them and asking for that information or participating in it so that you can obtain that information is helpful. And then we get to online salary databases. This is the one that all our employees like, right? So you go and you type in, how much should I be making as a computer programmer? And usually the first ones that pop up there are PayScale or salary.com. And they say, hi, Sam, from wherever on your computer, wondering how much you should be making in your current job. Give us some more information about your current job, and we'll punch out a number for you to tell you how much you should be making. So when you look at pay factors and PayScale and salary.com, this is a lot of crowdsourced data. LinkedIn is starting to do the same thing. Indeed is pulling it from job postings. Glassdoor is crowdsourced data. If you've ever tried to go on a Glassdoor and didn't give them your salary, you realize how hard it is to get past that first screen without putting in salary data. So this crowdsourced data has some legitimacy to it. I'm not throwing the whole thing out. Indeed has great legitimacy to it. They're pulling wage data from us who are posting jobs. They're also taking wage data from individuals. Glassdoor usually takes it just from individuals, it pulls it from jobs as well. This is what your employees are seeing. In fact, if you don't put a wage on Indeed's job posting when you post something, Indeed is going to say, you didn't give us a wage? Here's what I'm going to put on the job posting. This is what we have seen other companies pay for this job title, which I've had before where we've posted jobs and employees have said, we're paying this much for this job? No. That's what Indeed has put on as a suggestion and confused everybody as they looked at this job posting. So in light of you not putting a wage on, Indeed suggests what that job posting might be. So online salary databases is what you're going to get as printouts from your employees when they come to advocate for their salary increases. And then direct competitor analysis is getting easier and easier. And we'll talk about this a little bit as well because job postings are changing in Ontario and it's going to be fun. So 37% of online job postings in Ontario included salary information in 2022. This, I'm sure, is much higher, and it's going to be going to 100% pretty soon. If you haven't heard, the Ontario government has sent out a message saying we are going to require everybody to put job posting wage information on job postings. Yay! So this puts us as employers in a position to be have to be much more proactive with our compensation and our compensation approach. Now, as somebody who does recruitment, I see the pros with putting wage data on a job posting. It's going to help people self-select. It's going to help your recruitment process be a lot more streamlined because you're going to be attracting the people who are able to do the job for what you have available in your budget to pay. It's also going to cause some issues for small businesses who don't have internal equity because of the way that they've grown. So perhaps some people are making exorbitantly more than the market because of just the way that small businesses grow. Maybe some people are not performing and you need to have a midline person come in. And we see this a lot where jobs are similar, marketing, accounting. You have somebody who's not performing and you need to have somebody with more seniority come in, and you haven't had that conversation strong enough with the non-performer in the meantime, and it causes a lot of confusion. How have we managed this in job postings so far? I don't know how the legislation is going to roll out or what the requirements of the wages on job postings are going to look like, but I know human nature plays a part in this whole thing. So if I'm hiring somebody, say for a supervisory role in retail, and I'm looking for somebody who maybe is middle of the road with experience, but if I find a star candidate, I will pay the right price for that star candidate, but I'm also willing to train. So I'm willing to take someone fresh, full of energy and enthusiasm and train them for the role. How do I price that? Because we know as human nature, if we put in the entire wage of that starting individual who I'm going to train and mentor and bring to the table and get them into a great place, and the top of the line wage for the person who's coming with all the skills and qualities that I need and is going to walk in and do an amazing job, and I'm going to be hands off as a manager, those are two very different numbers. And as humans, when we see a wage band that says 45 to 65,000, what are we going to be expecting? Well, I'm not going to ask for 65. That's a little much. But I want 62. So it puts these unrealistic expectations to people off the bat. Now, I will pay 65,000 for the right person, but I'm not paying it for the person I have to mentor and train because I'm going to be investing my time into their career. So how do we put that on a job posting? Few options. We can look at two job postings. We can put two different wage bands based off of skills and experience. Another thing that I've liked to do in the past is I like to take off the top end. I like to give myself some play and some room in that wage band. So maybe my top end that I post is 45 to 58, but I know I'm willing to go to 65 for the right person. And that way I'm keeping people's expectations in a little bit more of alignment. The other piece to this is when you put a wage band of 45 to 55 and you're offering 45,000 to somebody, how does that feel in the negotiation process for them? Oftentimes in the salary negotiation process, we want to have that win-win. And if we're coming in at the bottom end of our wage scale to start somebody off, it doesn't feel like a win-win from a psychological standpoint. So maybe we push the bottom end of our wage scale down a little bit more. And these are the things that as small business owners, we need to be crafty with. We need to be creative with in order to make sure that we can manage our business accordingly and get the right people in the door and get that win-win. So when we've figured out what does our compensation look like, where are we going to be, and how are we going to look at our total rewards, what benefits are we offering? We spoke briefly on HSAs this morning with Brandon, and I love HSAs, especially as a small business environment. I think it is such an amazing program. I have a lead, my director of operations. So she had this year, we were looking at our bonuses and how we were going to bonus out our team. And she mentioned to me that she has a bill for her son coming up that's $4,000 of dental work. And I said to her, well, what would it look like? Would you be interested, instead of me giving you a bonus at this amount of money, if I put $4,000 into an HSA for you? And that $4,000 costs me as an employer $4,000 plus admin fees. So we're looking at like $4,500. But the benefit to her is, as opposed to giving her a bonus of $4,000 and she receives $2,600 of it after taxes, she gets entitled to the full $4,000. So as small businesses, we get the opportunity to be creative with our total rewards. But one thing we don't do enough of is communicate it. So this is something that we've used recently with a client who wanted their teams to understand what's included in their total rewards. So we have our base salary compensation, we have cell phones, and this is annualized. This company actually was they had a remote teams, and they actually paid for house cleaning as a perk for their teams. And I'm thinking I want that for my team pretty soon, because that's a pretty cool perk if you have a remote team. They had some other bonuses that they talked about in terms of employee lunches, and that's where that $500 came from. So the subtotal of compensation is around $61,000. They also had a group benefits plan that, give or take, was about $3,000 for this specific individual where we pulled this from. And the life insurance, so the whole health and wellness, the spending account, came to another $5,000 that the employer was paying for. Additional investments included, they had an RRSP contribution that they did. And then we included in here the EHTC, PP, and EI, because I think sometimes I get that is not a perk for an employee, but I think a lot of employees don't know how much employers pay into taxes on their behalf as well, which I think is an important piece of communication. So we have additional total of benefits, and then we talked here about what the cost is for vacation, sick days, public holidays as well. That's not included in the total, but again, if we're communicating all that's included, we put it in this whole total rewards summary. And we put this in a nice letter, a thank you letter, and just, we do this once the bonuses are gone out so everyone can see what the total comp looks like. And this helps employees understand what is included in their total rewards, so they have a better idea that it's not just base salary. This is just a quick overview to show you what happens when you put money into a benefits plan versus base salary. So the HSA specifically, you'll see here, $1,000 HSA as opposed to $1,000 pay raise. The net benefit is, give or take, $370 to the employee. And to you, you're coming out about the same on the pay and taxes. But from a value perspective to the employee, if this can be communicated, you can see why that tool will really help in your pay philosophy and in your total rewards communication. So I flew through the baseline of these pretty quickly because I know we have a lot of great questions. So at this point, Hugo, I haven't looked at the chat. So if there's any questions that you want to throw my way, let's open it up and see what we have.
Sure. Thank you so much. What a great presentation. We have recorded the entire thing. So if you want to go back and review anything, you have that option. And if you do need more information, you can get in touch with Laura and her team at Essential HR. We'll put the link in the chat. And I got the feeling when you were giving the presentation is that there's a lot of information here, but I'm also getting a real tip of the iceberg kind of feeling like there's a lot of depth behind this question and probably way more than we can explore in the rest of the hour here. So I would recommend anyone getting in touch with more specific questions, but I do have some questions for you and we can jump right into those. One that came up actually while you were talking was about the skilled trades. And obviously there's a big labor shortage in the skilled trades right now. So if you're hiring and employing people in those fields, this is going to be a huge issue for you in a moment. And they asked, is there a report or a data source for specific trades industries that they could look at to determine compensation?
You know, without going into specifics, I would say there probably is. In the trades especially, you can pull union information as well from employment contracts or union contracts that have been leaked to Google. That would be one. I don't know any offhand, but I would put money on the fact that they exist. It's just trying to find out where to find them. But the municipal wage data is also online. Ontario government wage data is also online. Those are good places to start to see where the municipalities, the regions, and the government agencies are paying. Again, those are often unionized as well, but it just gives a baseline. Picking and benchmarking your salary is an art and a science. And you need to find multiple sources in order to come to a conclusion for your company as to where you should pay.
Okay, thank you. So it leads me into my second question too, which was about the sources for data in determining salaries. And I'm so glad you mentioned that crowdsourced data is perhaps a little bit misleading. And it's something that I'm a political scientist. I'm the director of policy and government relations at the chamber. And this is something that gets to me constantly is when it comes to a complex policy question, I'd always rather hear from one real expert than from 1,000 people on the street because they'll have a better opinion. So you mentioned some of the sources that you can go to there, but I'm wondering, like right now, in general, like what are your go-tos for like a good salary picture? Like if you had to pick 3, for example, like what would you say?
Right, we've purchased a salary survey. I think it's called Corey. It cost us about $2,000, and we'll probably do it again in 2023. We like that one because it seems how they collect the data is appropriate for our people groups. Another one that I would download for free, I think, is Randstad. They put out some decent information. Again, we're dealing with job titles and not job descriptions. The third one I would look at is grab some of the pay scales or the Indeed, like one of those crowdsourced. You've got to use that as a marker in comparison because that is what your teams are using, your employees are using as a marker in comparison. That's where they're going. So I would look at those 3 first. LinkedIn used to have an amazing salary research on theirs, and it hasn't been the same in the last year, and I'm hoping they bring it back as to how it was a year ago because it was so simple to use and it was fantastic.
Okay, thank you. That's good to refer to. Do you know what happened to LinkedIn? Did it just stopped being good, or they made a decision? Or
I can't keep up with LinkedIn's changes.
okay,
So I'm just like, oh, here it is today, gone tomorrow.
right.
I'm not quite sure. I don't know if they're turning it to a paid service. You never know.
Yes, that could be. distinct possibility. Something else I wanted to ask as well. Like we talked about the total compensation package, and we also talked a lot about you talked a lot about job postings as well. So I'm just wondering, like when it comes to like obviously we're gonna have to start posting the salaries for all jobs in Ontario once they figure out what that legislation looks like, and assuming that this question won't be answered in that bill when it comes out, but would you put the total compensation package on a job posting? Like, because oftentimes it will say, you know, this is a salary plus benefits. Or would you actually list out plus RRSP contributions of this and healthcare package valued at that? And would you break it all down, or just is plus benefits enough? What do you think now?
So in the same way that when you get a resume from a candidate, that resume, the purpose of that resume is for that candidate to get an interview. It's not to get a job.
Mm.
The purpose of your job posting is to get an application. So what I would say in how you're going to attract candidates is get that application in and then have a total comp summary. Let's talk about all the benefits and all the amazing things that happen at your company. Have a sheet, have a one-pager, and follow up with that candidate after that first interview that, you know, you love this person, like you're selling yourself. It's a dating profile, essentially. That job posting is a dating profile. And then after the dating profile has attracted the right applicant, you want to come with the biography and say, this is why I'm fantastic. Look at no skeletons in my closet, and here's what my future looks like. That's what we want to have with our job posting. So you want to hint at it, but I wouldn't put it all out there, because at the end of the day, I encourage any employer to go and look at a few job postings and see how much of it you actually read. Most of the time, people are skimming and they're not actually reading it. So keep the good stuff for that kind of second date.
Okay, so you want to be enticing, but also a little bit coy.
Isn't that how we play it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think maybe the dating profile is a good analogy there. Like you want to bring the right people in, but not give everything away at first. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
You come to a compensation webinar and you get dating advice. Look at that.
Yeah. Another question just came in the chat actually is how would you suggest providing employees with the total compensation package, the information, without it seeming aggressive? Thinking of a company that doesn't perhaps give a yearly bonus out, what's a sort of a nice way, I guess, of presenting the total compensation package is what's being asked here.
I think there's a more holistic approach than a one-pager if you're not specifically, you know, giving a bonus out, or but I do think when you do salary reviews, there's an opportunity to add it all in there without it feeling, you know, because every time you give a salary review, you know, the HR person in me says you should be writing that out in a nice letter saying, thank you for all of your hard work. Here's your new compensation. And that's being filed for your records as well. I think your opportunity comes in that letter if you want to start explaining this. But I also think there's a more holistic annual approach that you look at this. So if you have benefits, I can tell you one of the most underutilized benefits, and you know, our benefits friends would agree with this, is EAPs. As a company, if you have an EAP with your benefit package, my guess is it's being underutilized. So taking a look at your total compensation over the year and talking about specific pieces of it every quarter or every month and explaining, hey, this is what's included in our benefit package for long-term disability. This is why we think it's important for you to know about extended medical. Hey, you might not appreciate your benefit package as a 22-year-old who doesn't seem to have many health issues. But let me tell you, when you go to Holiday Valley and you sprain your ankle and you have to go to an American hospital, you're really going to appreciate that little travel insurance piece that you are not really fully aware of in your benefits package. So making sure that we talk about and communicate it as a whole and not just a one-time. As employers, we love to give one message and assume that everybody has absorbed it in the same way that we understand it. So I think there's an even better way to communicate this than a one-pager.
Okay, thank you. To Chatter, I hope that answered your question. If you have a follow-up, please type it in and we'll post it as well. And anyone else who has questions, we do have time, please put them in. Another question I want to ask is going back to what Brandon was talking about earlier with this an example of what you call non-monetary compensation, not the paycheck benefits and so on. So I wanted to ask, when it comes to that, what role do they play in attracting and retaining talent, and what are the innovations in this? What are the hot non-monetary compensation things that you can offer? Like what's a really big get for potential employees or current employees that can differentiate you as an employer?
Oh, this is a big question. Where do I start with it?
We've got 15 minutes.
As small businesses, we have this incredible opportunity to be influencers to people's lives. We're not just employers. We're helping, I have a team of 5. When you even a team of 30, there is a direct connection that you have to your teams that they will never have in large organizations. When you as an employer know what's happening in somebody's family and you're able to show empathy and actually care, and not just from a lip service standpoint, but from an actual human to human standpoint, when you're able to talk to people about their weekend and ask how their kid's soccer game was, when you're able to make relationships and connections with your team, that is one of the biggest non-monetary retention strategies. I hate to use the word retention strategies because, again, we're not doing it because we're trying to be good employers. We're doing it because we're good humans. But those types of connections, the community, and we have, I'll give you a few examples. Verhoof Electric is a great example of a small business in the area who builds community in such a fantastic way with their teams. Daikin is another one of our local employers who they not only do events, I think of one like they paint nights during COVID, not for their employees necessarily, but for their employees' spouses and kids as well. They brought people in a way that was beyond what you would ever see in a corporate environment because of that ability that we have as small businesses to be flexible and nimble and know our people. So that's where I'm going to start with non-monetary. The other big one right now that most people care about, there's not too many that don't, is flexibility. I started Essential HR because I wanted flexibility as a new mother, second child, but as a mother, I didn't want to go back to work full time. I said, can I come back part-time? And they said, no. I said, cool, I'll go find my own work. And our business is built on that fact that I know there's other people like me who also want flexibility. And it's not always 100% something we can do depending on the industry. But when there is an empathetic understanding of, and we do this really well as employers, we're empathetic the first time and the second time, maybe even the third time, but then we're like, I gotta run a business. And we do. But the ability to really understand what's going on in somebody's life and say, okay, I realize attendance is an issue right now for you because of A, B, and C. How are we going to figure this out? Because this is what I need from you. So how are we going to figure out, how can we work together to make sure you can take care of what's going on in your personal life and we can take care of what's going on in the business and it works seamlessly together? Again, as small business owners, we can have these conversations that in larger corporate environments becomes a lot more cut and dry.
Right. The human touch, then. You
It's
need
the
to
human touch.
empathize with your employees, know what they want, and you'll know what benefits they need. And I think it's what you're saying is like sort of ask yourself, like, what would I need in their shoes? What would make sense to me, right?
Yeah.
But I'm glad you mentioned flexibility as well, because this is something that's coming up more and more. And I think it's something that the pandemic really changed permanently, is the advent of flexibility and working from home as well. And I wanted to touch on this very briefly. There was a survey came out March last year, said a quarter of working Canadians would take a pay cut of an average of 16% if it meant they could work from home remotely full time. So if you were thinking of doing this, like if you're an employer and you have employees and they can work from home remotely, is it fair to cut their pay for that? Is it legal to cut their
Is it
pay for
legal?
that? Like, what are the thoughts on this? Or is it okay to, even if you don't cut their pay per se, if you bring on new hires who are exclusively work from home, to pay them less than ones that are in the office? Like, what are your thoughts on this?
Oh, Hugo, what a big question. Okay. Where do we start with this? So first of all, I'm going to go back, and there's new legislation that actually just came out from CRA about remote workers and what province they might actually be working under. So you might be an Ontario company, but you've hired somebody in BC and they're actually a BC employee. And the CRA is saying you need to pay them as a BC employee. You need to take taxes on them like a BC employee. So that's coming out. And what it does is it makes remote working a little bit more complicated for small businesses. So I have an employee who is actually in BC, and after the pandemic came out, they've really not refined how they see the approach. She's a BC employee working for me who is an Ontario employer, and I pay her BC holidays, I pay her BC overtime. It makes it a little bit more complicated. Just as a note for anybody who's watching who says, I can hire from anywhere, you absolutely can. You might have to have 3 employment policy manuals for 3 different employees. So just to keep that in note. Can you tell somebody, okay, you can work remotely, but we are knocking your pay off 15%? I guess if there's an agreement for it, and it isn't construed as constructive dismissal, I would not be okay with that until I ran it by the employment lawyer. But if they said, this is what I want to negotiate, and I'm willing to cut my pay 15% if you let me work remotely, I think it's a great, I think you need an employment lawyer on this to make sure that you're not constructively dismissing your employee, or that they can't come back at you for it. The other piece is that we haven't figured out as employers yet, myself included, with remote environments, is who's paying for what. So, for example, paying for somebody's cell phone or a portion of a cell phone if they're using it for company business, that we've always kind of done that. But now we have people who are working from home, and some of the universities and colleges have figured it out a little bit more. But as small businesses, we're like, gosh, working from home might actually cost me more as a small business than having people come into an office. So for example, if I now have to pay for someone's internet and cell phone, and if I have to pay for office supplies, and if I have to pay for, technically, according to the legislation right now, anybody who is a remote worker is required to be first aid trained and have a first aid kit at their house, by the letter of the law. So we have all of these weird little things going on. So what are we paying people for? And what is included in a tech stipend for working from home? And I think we're not having these conversations. We're just saying, sure, be a remote worker. And well, what if the chair sucks and now they have a musculoskeletal disease because of bad posture? And all of these pieces ask some bigger questions and make it a little bit more complicated. So I think as employers, from a compensation standpoint, before we start knocking someone's pay down, we have to figure out what are we willing to pay for to have a remote worker, and then we add it back to our total rewards and compensation summary so people know what this looks like. But back to the original question, can you knock someone's pay? Probably. There's probably a way to figure it out, even if it's changing, the job contract. Is it a great idea for the 15%? Probably not. Just a personal opinion.
Okay, so the short answer is maybe. Yes, maybe.
It depends.
Okay. Yeah, and I would also recommend talk to an employment lawyer. That's always good. It's never bad to talk to an employment lawyer. If you don't have an employment lawyer, we have lots of employment lawyers who are chamber members. So contact us at the chamber. We'll hook you up. But I always say, like, a good lawyer does not cost you money; they save you money.
Right.
Yeah. So this is one of those things, I think, where dot your I's and cross your T's for sure. Next question. We have a few more minutes. So I just want to get on here with the compensation packages. particularly putting out. Now, I've read some things about being fully transparent with these, like
Mhm.
making everyone's compensation package in the entire organization known to all of them, and having your pay grades and pay bands fully known to everyone. I know that a lot of post-secondary educations will do this. For example, they'll have pay bands with ranges in them, and they'll say, okay, you're in band B, you're in band A, and you'll know roughly what everyone else is making. And this can be, it can be more of an idea of fairness in a company. You know exactly why, if Bob is making more than me, then I can look at this and go, okay, this is why Bob is making more than me. It's because he has 5 years more experience. And that's laid out. But also maybe I don't want everyone knowing exactly how much I make and all my co-workers knowing how much I'm paid as well. It's a bit tricky. And I think your answer might be maybe to this one as well, but I want to ask it anyway, and just see if you have any thoughts on transparency and pay packages in a company.
Yeah, there's 2 slides that I deleted off of this, and I'm happy to send them out with the notes after, about 30 pros and cons of why transparency is fantastic and potentially horrendous all at the same time. At the end of the day, most of us started a business because we were passionate about an industry or we had a skill. We end up as being business owners and having to wear the HR hat and having difficult conversations and dealing with people is typically the most stressful part of our job once we've realized what kind of business we've grown here. When it comes to pay transparency, it can work, and it can work very well. If we're willing to have tough conversations with people we need to have tough conversations with. So all of a sudden, you find out that somebody, because of pay transparency, is making $5,000 more than you. And you go to me, your boss, and say, well, how do I make $5,000 more? And me as your supervisor or manager has to come up with a growth plan and a succession plan, or a growth plan and a performance plan to bring you along to the point where you also are at the same performance as the next person. And from an HR standpoint, we love this. This is what we thrive on. From a small business point, it's a lot of work. Now, it's beneficial, but it's also a lot of work. And all of a sudden, what if you aren't following the plan or aren't following it as well as what I think you should? Now I'm talking to you as a middle of the road great employee, not an excellent employee, but it can almost become a demotivating conversation as well, saying you're doing well, but not as well as Joe. So Joe's still hitting these 3 markers and you're not quite hitting it. So it becomes a lot more conversational. From an HR standpoint, we love it. We thrive on this. From a small business standpoint, this is extremely emotionally stressful for a lot of people to be having these conversations on a consistent basis. So you kind of have to figure out what works for your environment and what works for you as a manager or a business owner. And if you want to put it all out there, that's amazing. It's going to help people know where they can go in the business. It's going to help them be more motivated to hit the next step. But for potentially 10 or 20% of your employee population, it's going to be a lot of work for you as a business owner to help them through.
Right. And business owners already have a lot of work, generally speaking. So
yeah, and if they can toss off the HR hat because people are stressful, it's usually what we like to do.
Right. So lots of pros and cons you can list, but I think it's up to each individual business to decide if it's right for them. Right.
Some businesses are much more cut and defined, right? If you have an electrical company, it's a lot easier to put years of apprenticeship and years of service and build out a wage band that's very visible and very transparent.
Right, right. Is it maybe more viable for larger organizations where you have hundreds of employees, or than small businesses?
Yeah,
Right.
definitely.
But then they probably have their own HR people anyway, so they can.
They spend millions on compensation,
right.
Compensation philosophy and
Yeah.
bands.
Yeah. And you're mainly here for the small businesses that can't afford a daily HR person, but of course you still have all those HR questions, which is why we're here today, or we have been here, as we're now at 1 minute to go. So I'm gonna wrap things up at this point. If you did have any questions for Laura and we didn't get to them, please send them along and we'll pass them on. And once again, the link to Essential HR is in the chat. So any further questions on anything that we went over today, feel free, and I'm sure Laura would love to hear from you. Thank you once again for taking the time time to talk to us. It was incredibly insightful, and I really appreciated your presentation and your answers to so many really difficult questions today. My thanks again to YMCA Employment and Immigrant Services of Niagara for making today's webinar possible. We at the GNCC have more exciting programming coming up, including State of the City St. Catharines on February 27th with Mayor Matt Cisco, a next webinar with Simran Singh, one of the authors of the 2024 Ontario Economic Report, on February 29th, and our International Women's Day event, where we'll be presenting an award to the incredible Dr. Tapu Chimganda on March the 8th. Please check the chat for links to all of these and more. Thank you all for joining us once again. I learned a lot today, and I hope you did too. We hope to see you at the next Lunch and Learn, and have a wonderful afternoon.